This is going to be a walkthrough guide for assignment 1 for anatomy and physiology. The first thing you need to do is you need to download this booklet to be completed for assignment 1. Okay, I've already done so it's up here. I'll open the booklet and it should populate this document here. So what I need to do is I'm just going to change the size of the window so you can see what I'm doing. And this booklet has to be completed in its entirety, so everything on here will need to be completed. So the first part asks you to identify and describe the axial and appendicular and colour in the diagram below using 2 different colours. It's going to be difficult to colour it in because you're doing it electronically. So what I suggest is that you insert maybe a text box or shape, and so we draw that and we change the shape however you want, and then you can maybe decide that the line colour you want is going to be red, for instance. We might want to change the thickness, and then all I do is I rotate it and I go, right, okay, there's one part, and then I might copy that and do another one and then rotate it for the other arm, put it roughly on the other arm, and then I'd also do the axial. Be careful when you do the axial that you do not include the pelvis, because that's the other part of the appendicular. Okay, so what I do, so maybe do the legs then. I'm not going to do it all because this is your work, not mine. And then I'd probably do the other leg, and then finally I'd do the axial in a different colour. Once I've done that, I come down here and I give a detailed description of what the appendicular of the skeleton is. So I might think about how many bones are in there, I might think about what it consists of, what its main function is. I might even give some examples of the bones that are found in that part of the skeleton. I'd also do the same for the axial, so how many bones are in the axial, what are the main functions, where it's found, and maybe give some examples of those bones that are found in that area. Then I'd move on to the next section. Okay, this section here is to label the skeleton, so be careful because obviously we've been using a different diagram, so it's really important that you think about where does that bone actually go. So for instance, if you're thinking about the radius, we said the radius goes into the thumb, so make sure you label the radius correctly. The only thing you'll notice on this diagram, as opposed to the diagrams we've been doing in class, is that the phalanges are on the hand here, but in this diagram they haven't included the phalanges at the bottom, so you only have to label the phalanges on the hand in this diagram. When you type into the box, what you'll notice is that the writing is really small. So if I just put the cranium, what I would expect you to do is just to go in there and then maybe increase the size of the writing. If you do that, then you may need to increase the size of the box so we can read it. Okay, so you need to do all the bones. The other part you need to do is you need to label up the spine, but you don't just label it, you also say how many bones are in there. So for each section you would be expected to do that, and that page is done once you've completed all of that. Here you talk about the bones, so the bone types. So you've got a long bone, so we might go long bone here, and then we describe what is a long bone, what's the structure of a long bone, what's the function of the long bone, and give me all the details you possibly can about these bone types. Okay, same for the short, same for the flat, irregular, and sesamoid. Next part, we look at the functions of the skeleton. So we give as much detail as we possibly can about support and shape and how the skeleton offers, or how the skeletal system offers that function. We then do the same with the protection. Remember, be as detailed as you possibly can and give examples where possible. Then we go on to attachment of skeletal muscle, blood production, and finally mineral storage. Can't reiterate enough, you need to make sure that you put absolutely the most amount of detail you can to make sure you meet the criteria. Then we move on to what we did last week, which is the 3 joint classifications. So we talk about a fixed joint, which is the scientific name is fibrous joint, and you describe exactly how that joint's structured. You give as much detail as you can, and you say how much movement happens in there. So if it's a fixed joint, we say no movement. We then give an example of where those fixed joints can be found. We then do exactly the same for the slightly movable or cartilaginous, and again we say where it can be found. If you've only got one example is fine. If you've got two examples, fantastic. And then we do the freely movable, which is the synovial joint, and we give as much detail as we possibly can in terms of the structure of the synovial joint and the movement that occurs. Is it freely movable? Is it slightly movable? And then you give me an example of a couple of synovial joints in the body, and then you need to give me an image. Okay, so you must put an image of a synovial joint in there. Finally, we're on to the last bit. Okay, so here are the 6 synovial joints. Again, we covered these last week. So we'd go pivot, do the nice easy ones first, hinge, ball and socket, saddle, doing a thumb, and here we can call it condyloid, or ellipsoid. Okay, and then actually that needs to go up there. Apologies. And then we get plane or gliding here. Plane / gliding. Right, so we've got our 6 different ones. The images are quite difficult to unpick, but then you need to describe each of them. That's the bit that you need to do. So give a detailed description of the structure of the joint. Okay, when you give that detail, it's really important that you give as much as you possibly can, and maybe examples. So we filled out some information on this last week. Use as much of that as you possibly can. Okay, if you have to go on to 2 pages because it extends the box, that's fine. Okay, when you do the movements, okay, so if we did the movement for the ball and socket, you can't say a wide range of movement or movement in all directions. You have to be specific. So you go flexion, extension, and I won't give them all because it's your work, and so on. So how many specific movements happen at each joint, and you must make sure that they're correct. Now I gave you a sheet with all the movements on, so make sure you do that. When you get to this condyloid, obviously a condyloid can be found in the wrist and the ankle. So it's really important that you list the movements for the wrist, and maybe you bracket it and say wrist, and then you list the movements for ankle and you bracket it and say these movements happen in the ankle. Okay, because they are very different in terms of the movement names. And that's pretty much the assignment done. Once you finish that assignment, or finish the booklet, you need to come onto here, and then you click onto this bit here, which is the assignment hand-in, and it will show you your name. You will need to upload it. Okay, so you simply just click here, gives you an opportunity to upload a file, so you give it a title, and then you upload the files. You can either drag and drop them, and then you just add submission. Okay, so it's really important you do that, and that's how you complete your assignment and submit it. This must be in by the 11th. Okay, so you've got a bit of time over the weekend to complete it. It's not a difficult assignment. It's pretty much straightforward. The structure's all there for you, so please make sure you get that done. Thank you.